Welcome to another edition of For the Love of Creatives podcast. I'm your host, Dwight,
And I'm
and
Maddox.
we're the connections and community guys. And today our featured guest is Darin Triplett. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes. How are you?
Terrific.
Glad to have you, Darin.
Yeah, we're so glad that you could join us. We love the fabulous artwork that you do, the oil paintings that are just so uh, there's something about them that really calls because you see real life and you see real people, and in a way that just invites you to look and know more and ask, you know how do I fit in that scene, or what's going on there. um, I know that you have a lot of different things that you do. I mean, you're working at an architectural firm. You do poetry, you do oil paintings, you've done photography. Um, what would you like to share with our listeners about what it is to be in Darin's world?
Well, what I can say. Well, first off, thank you for that. Thank you for the introduction. Um, well, I myself I define myself by a couple of A's, sometimes three, and that's artist, architect, and advocate, or and thinking about that, and in my advocacy, or in my activism, I've just picked different tools that I have skills in to communicate it, whether it be through the poetry and the written word, or it be through the photography, trying to capture scenes, or through painting, which allows me to not only capture them, but in my retelling, I put myself in there and can adjust moments and things like that. It also calls on me to sit with it and really be in those moments. So it's not a direct representation the way that like a photograph would be,
Mhm.
despite the realism that tends to be in some of my work. There's just a place, a conversation, kind of a dance, and in creating that. And I try very much so to express real people, real life, but then turn around and invite people into it. So a lot of times I try and find nostalgic moments, not real full narratives. So you can ask yourself about the narrative and ask the people that are in it, or even me, to just spark the conversation, not to command the conversation. So that's a lot of what's going on in the work, and just trying to, because I think it's valuable for us as people to have those dialogues, internally and externally.
And I think it's beautiful the way that you frame it in terms of the three A's. And I'm most intrigued by the advocacy because it has expression even beyond art that's consumed. I know that you've actually hosted several events and you do things to build community.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And because at first it was activist, and then I kind of went from the activism thing to advocacy, because um I don't, as much as I'm fighting for things and fighting for other people to be there, it's really advocating and acting as like a vessel to help communicate these things, and also giving people space, because it's a lot of times we're struggling, and especially in many marginalized communities, about finding a seat at the table, about being able to have that voice and being seen, about being heard, truly seen and heard, truly having your voice mean what we want it to mean, and being appreciated. And so I think in that, especially when you have somebody step up to advocate for you, you feel special. You feel seen. You feel like, oh, they do feel me. They do see me. I'm able to be here. I am important. And it gives, a person agency in that. And like, if nothing else, that's something that we want, and emboldening in us to live like much more open, much more, like out there lives, and live our truth. So that's why it's so important to me, for me to do that, and why I've taken up painting certain things. And you'll notice in my work, just won't see many, if ever, any celebrities. You
Mm.
always see like real people. Like these are just like somebody in these moments, and usually not even a lot of clothes. But so it's not about the brands. It's not about what you're hiding behind. You show up as your like this is what you are. This is what you've grown to in this space.
Yeah,
I get that. Oh, go ahead, Dwight.
I was just going to say there is something that's real in so many senses, an authenticity and just a lived experience that I appreciate when I'm looking at any of your works.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm definitely fighting for that part. It's just I feel like, especially in this age of social media, and so many other things, like people put on a mask, you you're there, like this is just like this little piece of the world that's like aggressively curated and modified and edited and all those things. And I was like, what if we don't though? It's like, like not even like a whole like, oh, this is the big to do. Like, why don't I just show up? Like, let's see how it goes. And I think in that space and seeing how it goes, because that's more so the way we live our. I mean, as much as we attempt to curate things, that's how we live our day. Like we don't know what happens when we show up to work. You could write the calendar and then everything changed. I think it was John Lennon um, that made the statement, "Life is what happens while you're making other plans."
Oh, I love that.
So like I think it's kind of that, and I think that like layering that into like our existence allows for certain things to happen.
Yeah. Maddox, did you have something you wanted to say?
I do. As you spoke about advocacy and being from a marginalized community, and of course, many of us are from marginalized communities of some sort. Um, what would you say the biggest challenge has been? You're a multidisciplinary creative or artist or whatever the word you would use is. What has been the biggest challenge of being a man from a marginalized community?
Money. No, honestly, sometimes one of the biggest things is money. It's because it's like um you're finding ways to navigate on shoestring budgets, and because you're not necessarily invested in it as quickly, and it's hard to have things kind of congeal around you, or having to build the support, because so many people, when you're in marginalized communities, are fighting their way up.
Mhm.
And so it's hard to help bear the weight of others when you're fighting for yourself. And so I understand that. And so when you're attempting, especially just in reference to production of the arts, right? Uh there's a certain just like real capital investment that has to happen. Like these are large scale oil paintings that have to have a space to do it, the lighting, and so many other things with that. Um and so sometimes the barrier for entry for people to just execute on what they want to becomes challenging to get. And I've had some opportunities onto myself where scholarships were made available to me that I was able to capitalize on, um, where, you know, being a little stubborn, a lot of stubborn, has allowed me to to keep doing some things despite the fact it's like, oh no, you should go do this. This is going to make you more money. This is going to make you more money, because it's just that general survival that you're trying to do while you're trying to do this other thing. Um, but fortunately, like I said, for me, I was a bit stubborn, um, definitely aggressive in reference to what I felt inside myself. And I'm a person who kind of lives within my heart, and that has set up for it. But I also know for other people, when in those positions, you abort, abandon ship. You like this is hard, and that those challenges were not, they were not present, and I used the double negative on purpose. But there was a presence to them. But and I would say that that tension um created like a desire to like produce in a certain way in the work itself and in all of the works themselves. And so it's always that hard part is what's has sharpened it. Like, what's it, steel sharpens steel type thing. And so these very, very still very hard moments have, as much as they've been hard, they're the one thing that's sharpened me in reference to what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, I know that for a lot of listeners, they may be hearing your story for the first time, and they don't have the benefit of knowing some of the very real struggles that you've gone through. Like, was it 2007 when you were setting up in school in Louisiana and
No, that
trying to
was
figure it out?
well, I can kind of give a little bit of a rundown.
Mhm.
So 2007 was when I actually finished in Louisiana. So
Okay.
everything was finished. So I started down there 2002. So went there for architecture, and there was stuff that happened even before that.
Yeah.
So I've been through, some fair share of challenges because originally out of Chicago,
Mhm.
born and raised there, and grew up. Yeah, I'm number 4 of 6 in reference to siblings. It's 3 boys and 3 girls. We alternate like the Brady Bunch, which is interesting in onto itself.
Yeah.
Girl, boy, right on down the line. So living as like the middle child, not that I ever thought it was a big deal, but 4 of 6, I was born in '79. This is Reagan era. It comes
Mhm.
with its own challenges coming up in Chicago. And that time comes with its own challenges in the neighborhood I'm from. 'Cause I'm from Inglewood originally, and then moved to Auburn Gresham, which are not sure of what we'll call hood for the and so there was financial struggles and woes and things like that that happened throughout my life, even when I was young. So I know what it is to have a Christmas with no gifts. And my parents like pulling things together to make sure the lights stay on and we stay fed. Which is not necessarily the easiest path to find yourself in architecture school, which is expensive. Like, and then going through school and actually just really pulling it together, grabbing at every little thing. And I went through like health challenges coming up because I was born with a collapsible trachea and like would have respiratory issues and pass out, like whatever. Fought my way through that. Ran track,
Mhm.
despite all else. I was like kind of pass out from time to time, but like
That's amazing.
willing to just do it. And that was something like just the early attitude towards stuff. And um and that led into like when I was in Louisiana, uh as I'm just running through the whole thing. We can go back and
Mhm.
cover different pieces, just like high level points. But in
Mhm.
Louisiana, I was down there, and being down there from like '02 to '07, '05 is in between that when the hurricanes hit us. So
Mhm.
having to deal with that, going through, kind of got swept by Katrina and got a direct hit by Rita, and like going through that whole thing as I'm, just being a poor college student as it was. And that, despite my own personal struggles, I was continuing to advocate for people. And I was doing some writing on the social responsibility of design and what it took to do these kind of things. This is when I was diving much deeper into psychology and things like that, like with my independent studies, and also looking at sociology because of like the economic disparity that was happening in some of these areas. Because I was in the oil district. Well, I was around the oil district. It was like right by the school
Mhm.
where some mid-level oil executives in Lafayette, Louisiana, had these like tremendous houses, but there's a neighborhood that was not far from one of the other studios in the area called Four Corners, where um, the average grade level completed was like 8th grade, like incredibly impoverished area. But it was like in a city when in the 1980s had the most millionaires per capita. I was like, why is this disparity here? And so like, I started like so I did this building, uh like it was like this community of the arts and education center that was my thesis project. And so I had psychologists and philosophers and things like that that were on my thesis review committee as I wrote about how to like get this change. And when people are looking, like for one, the people in power sometimes will put on a show to make it a little better. But then the other thing is it creates protection because people don't really want to be villains in the light. And so are allowed to be dark, they do that. And so that's been one of my things is to be a beacon and get eyes on the situation. Because once eyes on the situation, people put on the best show. And then in some ways, that has carried me through some things. Then that whole thing happened, moved back to Chicago in 2007, after doing a couple of shows and things like that, and actually working through some hurricane relief projects, which is really interesting, really cool, and really humbling to see what people were going through. But moved back 07, right as when you step into architecture, as the recession was hitting, like wonderful, like work and jobs and do all this. So I was freelancing and stuff for like almost a year of just like doing whatever little architectural odd jobs or whatever that I could make happen because it was just hard to land something during that time. Because during that same era, like 50% of the architecture firms across the nation had closed or something like that. And even firms that were still open were shrinking in workforces just because of what was going on in the country at large. And that posed some challenges, of course, as it all did for everybody. And then landed some work, start working with the city, but then we'll move forward very quickly. Then after life it kind of stabilized for a bit in 2017, I had a lung collapse. It's like, ugh, not wonderful. And I was doing really well. So I was training for a half marathon. And my mile time started falling off. This is March in Chicago. I thought I had a chest cold, so I went like a week without going to the hospital. And then when I finally did go, they're like, no vascularity on the right side of your chest, sir. How fast can your family get to you? I said, 30 minutes. They said, that's not fast enough. You need to get to the emergency room. So after kind of almost like exiting the earth that day, like, you go through the whole thing. And I wanted Jimmy John's that morning, but I did not have it because I knew the day that was about to come. And at that point, because just other things in life, because you kind of live life on autopilot sometimes when you get things to stabilize for a while. But it reminded me I wasn't doing everything that I wanted to on an everyday basis to bring to work the life to life the work that I wanted to do. I was doing enough. I was finishing my architecture, doing this, doing that, but I wasn't advocating in the same way. So that reminded me of like this fragility of life. And so I started like working with like a certain type of fervor, like in reference to it, like started doing some other projects, had another exhibit or whatever. Things in Chicago with architecture weren't going exactly how I wanted. So that's when 2019, when I got opportunity with a developer and came to Dallas. Worked that for a bit. Started, so I'm like doing the work and whatever, but things are starting to stabilize again. And I was like, yeah. So at the beginning of what was last year, now 2024, I had a motorcycle accident that nearly killed me, broke my leg. And just on my way to work one morning, it was January 3rd, and broke my leg, landed me in a wheelchair. And at that point, I was like, I cannot keep almost dying to inspire me to do amazing stuff. Get your stuff together and do it every day. And so even from the wheelchair, when I was still early in the year, I just pushed extremely hard to bring this stuff to life and to tell the stories and just garnering all the experiences and stories and life experiences and brushes with death that I've had over the years and just layered it into everything I'm doing and just lit this extremely like hot burning fire. And so I started getting a lot of attention. Like last year I was like published like 6 times and got a chance to be shown at UT Southwestern, shown in the mall. I'm forgetting the name of the big mall here, but
The Galleria,
North
yeah,
Park.
North Park.
yeah, I was shown in North Park Mall. Then got a show at the office, a group show, and just like all kind of stuff was just happening. Got invited to show in Chicago. It was like, and that's kind of where things are right now.
That's fantastic.
Darren, you made a couple of references to being stubborn. And I'm listening to your story and all the adversity, the challenges, and we're not talking about like, oh, I've got, creative block. You're talking about some really massive challenges. And what I'm hearing is maybe less stubbornness and more sheer massive determination. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
like wow.
yeah. It's that's pretty much yeah. It's I always refer to it as stubborn, but yeah, I have a goal, and I will not be taking off my square in reference to where I'm going with that. So, and
Well,
that
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, what is it that fuels that massive determination? What is the thing that the carrot? What is the carrot that you're always reaching for, or uh, I don't know how to word it any better than that. I don't want to say a goal because, oftentimes we put the goal out there like my goal is to go to the gym 3 times a week. Well, that's not really your goal. Who would make a goal like that? There's got to be something more than that, and I use that as an example because what gets me to the
No,
gym
I know what
is
you mean.
my carrot. The thing that keeps me doing what I need to do is I want to have quality of life right down to my last breath. And that is the thing that really gets me going. So it's not that short-term goal, it's that long-term vision. What's your carrot?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is quality of life, actually. The thing you say, and quality of life and fulfillment. And to me, fulfillment means being a bit of a beacon. I want like even whenever I like take another artistic adventure or endeavor, I want it sometimes to look like this is the only thing this person does. This has to be the only thing he does. Like when I see my paintings and like if you saw them at the Golden Black Candle Lounge, a lot of people when they see the work there, it's like 17 pieces. And then they look at it and like, oh, this is amazing. How is it living life as a full-time artist? I was like, I don't. They're like, oh. So like I'm like I'm working to um just fulfill or to pack as much experience that makes me happy, that makes people around me happy into this little thing we call life. And that and waking up every day and taking advantage of those opportunities to do that is kind of the way I walk through it all. And like I go to sleep and wake up like just was like, oh, I have another opportunity to make it awesome again. Let me go do it. And I keep doing it.
This begs another question. You have a full-time career as an architect. You paint more art than somebody that does it full time. You know,
Yeah.
you're a
Yeah.
part-time painter because you have a full-time job, and yet you paint more than most people who do it full time. You said I've been published 6 times this year. How do you do all that and maintain some kind of sanity and some kind of life balance? How do you keep all those plates spinning? Because this is something that most creatives are up against, and you somehow have cracked the code. How did you do that?
It's cathartic. So like the I find peace and relaxation in some of the efforts that I go through. And it's really cool to sit back and look at it sometimes. And um there's I don't maybe have as much traditional recreation as other people have. And sometimes even when with friends and things like that, that they hang out. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna be painting tonight. You can come over, like have a drink or something with me while I, paint. This is what's gonna happen. So I've had to invite like and have these worlds kind of play back and forth. And um there's also this whole thing about active procrastination, and one of the most popular figures, Leonardo da Vinci, in reference to active procrastination, because you'll know he painted on the Mona Lisa for decades or something like that.
Mhm.
But he had all these notebooks, thousands of pages of different projects and things like that he was working on. But one thing would kind of feed the next, and he would sharpen like certain skills and things like that. And I've borrowed a bit of that. There's another podcast that's got Casey Neistat. He talks about chasing curiosities and experiencing them, not necessarily going through with like, oh, this is the one single goal I have, versus like having these experiences and curiosities and doing that, going through the act of procrastination and actually just like using all your minutes. Like, well, like social media is extremely popular and people are able to spend a whole lot of hours on it doing nothing but say they have no time to do stuff. Like, no. Like you're not spending your time sometimes doing the stuff. And even with my social media feed and my Instagram, it's loaded with like my interests and like my active interests, like art. Like I get up sometimes in the morning and sometimes we just don't want to get up and get moving right away. So I get up and I like listen to some stuff about some contemporary art. I like to listen to and uh philosophy podcast. This guy Stephen West, just to give credit where credit's due, or stuff you should know. And so I'm listening to this stuff because I'm feeding myself, and this is going to layer itself into my art, or maybe a little bit too much NPR. But when I'm listening to NPR, that sometimes is driving what I'm about to do. A lot of the work that I started with, some of my erotic works and things like that, came from NPR articles about the pandemic and about how people were having this issue that was coming up with social distancing and the rates in suicide just after Tony Shea died. And I was like, oh, we need to focus on connection. We need to focus on intimacy. I need to layer this into what I'm doing. And so when this is happening over and over again, like I maybe just be sitting and listening to NPR on a drive to work, or like on a little run, but I'm actually fueling and still working on the art like passively. And when this is constantly happening, I am still moving the needle. So I think that's a lot of what it's doing. So it's the constant kind of just where like the Grand Canyon was a drip from the Colorado River from some stream that started a long time ago, and that thing is pretty big now. So
Yeah.
It is. That's a real unique way of approaching life and projects. Wow. I mean, that's pretty profound, Darren.
It
oh,
is.
thank you.
I can't help but be inspired. I love that you called out Leonardo da Vinci because his is the first story that's told by Robert Greene and his book Mastery, where
Mhm.
he talks about how because Da Vinci was not expected to do anything, he was left to his own devices. And as a result, we see the output of work that spans so many different fields.
Yeah. He would just be all over the place. And like, I'm gonna do this for a living. I'm gonna write this thing for this. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do this. Like, are you gonna get that painting done? Oh, I'm working on it. But check out this helicopter. Like
Right.
you'll build this in 400 years, I promise. It's a very interesting like thing that he was just kind of doing. Um, and I was like, as we talk about like, oh, Renaissance man, this like people can't be a Renaissance man in these spaces. I'm just like, just keep doing this stuff. Nobody told you not to. Like, just do it.
Absolutely. So, look, can we dip back in time? I want to go back to the beginning. What did it look like in the very, like, how old were you when you discovered that creative energy inside of you, and what did it look like?
Um, it uh, it's not, it wasn't discovered. It's just always been present. It was kind of, I was born with it. Um, it was me as a little kid under a table drawing, constantly trying to analyze and see the world. Like I wasn't even reading yet, and I was pulling flowers off of the bushes in front of the house and trying to analyze them. I think I was about 8 years old when that came to, and it's like, I'm gonna open an art gallery one day, like because I want a place to do this. And by the time I was 12, I was like, maybe I'll be an architect so I can design my own art gallery. So this is, it's like, because I need to move these things out the way. Um, by the time I was 15 years old, I was already doing portraits and selling art to buy lunch and fancy clothes when I was in high school and selling sculptures. So it's been like, I'm one of those people do, this is always what it was.
You were a childhood entrepreneur.
Yeah, I was like, I knew people kept looking at it. I was like, here, you can have this. They're like, well, pay for. I was like, I want to eat. So here, I'll do your picture and you do this. So yeah.
Wow. Did any of your other siblings get this?
We all have our different ways that we're in it, in different things. Like my oldest sibling, she does, my sister Shonda, she does like jewelry making and things like that. Um, and she sells bracelets and earrings and all that stuff. And but as far as like finding that, I was probably one of the most aggressive, like in my youth, is knowing, like having this like singular focus. Um, but the other ones, I mean, we're all actually doing pretty well. Uh, couple couple electricians, like my sister Kashana's a business person. My sister Dina and Derek are both electricians. Kind of take over the family business. My little brother and my sister works down here for a cable company doing design for huge electrical services. And then my brother Darwin also works in construction. And he had some early like dabbling in the arts. And was actually a pretty good artist in his own right. Just kind of left it and got more interested in sports and basketball and things like that. And for me, I was like, yeah, I don't want to stop doing one. I'll just do all the things. So it's been, but yeah. Um, so just, it's a do all the things kind of attitude. And we all have had our experiences though, but we definitely um we dive into it. And we haven't, as a, like I told you, coming from the challenges we had early, none of us have used it as like, oh well, we're not gonna achieve. No, we just all like, no, try to make it happen.
Yeah, I
And
love.
did you find that you were supported by those around you, family?
Um, for the most part, I would say, it's, I would say that my immediate family definitely supported me. I don't know that they always understood it as what I was doing, I'll say, just because at times it, coming from like a middle class family or lower middle class family, sometimes it can look like a, art is like a parlor trick because it's a world of the aristocrats, that sometimes it feels like, and that direct line of like economic gain and references, selling some art is not really seen in that world. Not the same, not the way that it's traded in, the art world otherwise, when people are selling multi-million-dollar paintings at Christie's. So that's just not a real, there's, let's say real thing, but it's not a real thing to that world. It seems preposterous. So when I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do that, they were like, well, what about a real job? I was like, yeah, I'll do that too. Okay. But so it wasn't the lack of support, just sometimes the lack of exposure in reference to things that this is challenging. It's challenging to see it. And but then I took it upon myself to be like, well, I think I can do it. I'll show them. And so, and nobody told me, don't do that, Darren. So, but they were like, they would just kind of support me and also trying to create a person who would be self-sustaining and, invite me to do these other things. I was like, all right, yeah, I'll get to it. And I just kept doing the other little, I just kept doing like both things. And so and when you have that internal drive to want that thing to happen, you just keep doing the other thing.
Well, you
Well,
certainly
you
have
certainly
shown
have.
that now.
Oh yeah. It's being well received right now. It's being well received. I can't tell you how many times, and like if I put up like a little video or a little Facebook post or whatever, they're like, "Oh my, like I didn't know you had it like that. Like really, you do it like this? This is what you were talking about? Oh man!" And it's really cool. Because you from the people, and it's not a sense of pride in myself, but a sense of pride from the community I came from and people that are looking at it right now and so happy for me. And also proud of the fact I come from, the spaces with them. Like this kid's good. I didn't know he was doing that. This is what he was talking about. So it's been amazing.
You're definitely good. I don't think you probably need anybody to tell you that at this point, but your work is lovely. It's just, and it's unique, you know,
I
I
thank
think
you.
very unique. I mean, I was able to recognize it right away and go, that's Darin Triplett's work. And there's a lot of people doing portraits out there and things of I don't know whether you refer to that as a portrait, but they were all the ones I saw were mostly
Most of it's portrait. Yeah. Well,
and
that series in particular is portrait work.
you just approach it in a very unique way that's very attention getting.
Oh, thank you. Thank
You,
you.
you know, I had an expert tell me one time, don't try to be the best. There's only one spot for the best. Do what will make you stand out. Be different. Do what will make you stand out. And you have done that.
Well, I'm the best me.
Yeah,
like, like,
that's right.
and so I was like, at that level, yeah, I, my sister was asking me something yesterday. She was like, because there was something that came on. We were watching, that's what we were watching, Elementary. This is
Mm.
new Sherlock Holmes. Well, not it's new to me. I didn't watch it till now, but I guess it came out like 5, 10 years ago, something like that. But we were watching one of the episodes, and it was talking about spotting art forgeries, and Sherlock and Watson, they're going through and they're like, oh, this particular artist did this. And she asked me, she's like, is that a real thing? Can you tell like if it was a forgery or like who this is? I was like, there is a signature that is left behind many times by an artist, be it in their brushstroke, be it in their composition, be it in their style. I was like, there's a thing. There are people right now that will call me when they see my stuff sometimes. Like, I saw your work at such and such place. And I was like, even as I've changed certain things about my work, there's still like remnants of other things I've done with it. When people say, oh, I see you're doing this new thing, but I still love it, but will still recognize this is you. Like, and I was like,
You have
there's
a
a
personal
mark.
style.
Yeah, there's a mark that's, and me and any other artists, but there's a mark that's left behind that it speaks of a style. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, I think we've covered a great deal of territory here. I mean, I think that anyone would learn a great deal from the amazing challenges that you've had to overcome. Um, and I guess it kind of begs the question, if there was one overarching lesson that you've learned through everything that you've had to overcome and everything that you've done, what would that be?
There's a couple things, and I think they kind of feed each other. But there's definitely value in being persistent. But then there's also has to be an acceptance and an appreciation about the opportunities that you have for you. Like, oh, and there's this one um quote from this, well, not so much of a quote, it's a question, it's a poet by the name of Taylor Motley. And he asked this question at the beginning of one of his poems that actually came from a seventh grade class. And he says, when does the human heart rest? And actually, I'll give you all the opportunity to answer that question to see if either one of you can get it. I'll give you a try a piece and then I'll give you the answer if you don't get it. But when does the human heart rest?
Hmm. I mean, I could think of a myriad of possible answers.
There's one proper answer, so I'm gonna
I
just
would
Yeah.
say for me, perhaps the heart rests when I am able to fulfill all my own needs. In other words, I don't need outside validation or
oh,
it's
not
kind of
emotional heart. I'm saying your physical heart. Your physical heart. When does your physical heart rest?
oh, physical heart.
The muscle, the actual muscle. When does your
Okay,
heart rest?
Yeah.
I
Well,
misunderstood.
I I think that so just thinking it through, each as it's pumping, it's a contraction and an expansion. So I guess it has to rest in between each cycle. So
Yeah,
think
and
of
you
it
got it
resting
right
all
on
the
the
time.
first try. The human heart rests between beats, and that in onto itself. But that puts you into this like very feverish, like this quick cycle, and you're talking about, sometimes somewhere between like 60 and 180 to 200 beats a minute,
Mhm.
depending on what you're doing. So it is resting like in between beats. And so in reference to the way living life, like each moment or each thing is just kind of a beat. And I'll take that rest in between, but move on to the next thing, just like the human heart would. Like, and there's a certain resiliency in that strength and resting in between beats.
Hmm,
Oh, and
I
I
love that.
and I can see the larger pattern there. I remember I learned in Barbara Oakley's Learning How to Learn. There's this concept of there being a need to have periods of intense focus and having to go to a diffuse way of applying your attention. And you even referenced it earlier in this conversation. It's something that we need. Even when you're not directly working on something, your mind is chewing on it, and you're doing something that's going to actually lead toward a better outcome. But we need that time away.
Yeah. Yep. And so, but yeah, and that hopefully that answers your question in reference to like the things I think to take away and learn. It's like it's definitely the time away, but it's also the appreciation of it and it's taking advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, that's
Beautiful.
a big one. Mind blown.
I, I think I have one more thing I'd like to ask before we start to wrap up. You talked a little bit about post-pandemic realizing that there was a need for connection and so you had told us that you do some community stuff. What would you say the impact of that community work that you do, that community involvement, what has the impact been to your personal creative journey?
I it I can't say anything more than it feeds it. And what it is because um and I'll go back just a little bit before the pandemic, but when I was working on my work in architecture school, and it was this professor, Michael McClure, who was when I was writing the paper that was to feed my thesis, the social responsibility of design. And I was doing this thing specifically in Lafayette, and I was writing kind of in my own vacuum because I'm sitting down like constantly reading, I'm researching, writing. He asked me one day, he was like, "How are you going to do this?" I said, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "I'm reading about it." Like, he said, "You're going to do social architecture, but are you going to go talk to the social society?" I said, "Oh." yeah, I should probably do that. And so I started setting up meetings, and I started going out during my thesis phase and actually meeting with people from the community, like the people that I had read about, the people I studied about, but I hadn't communed with them. I hadn't sat in a real way. And it was that part. And so I constantly now, like even as I pick models, people ask like, how do you get your models? I was like, usually friends. Like, so that touch of the community, that like impacting people that way and allowing them to impact me. And even when I make a selection about people that are in my works, and some people that are going to be in the work, because I have a show opening on January 18th, and some of the people in the works and their stories, a friend of mine, Fallon, in reference to just like her love for her children, but like she calls me her spirit animal, which is fun because she likes the art and the other things I'm doing, and like this community aspect of things. And is my appreciation of her and celebration of that, my friend Jada, who's been an incredibly resilient person in reference to some of the underlying things. And she's a social worker herself, that so she was telling me, she was like, sometimes people don't see her sadness. And I was like, I see it, I know the sadness, but I appreciate your resilience. And I painted a picture of her that's also going to go in that show. And when I show her, both of them were almost drawn to tears. I have another friend of mine, Danielle, that is also one person to show, and she has a certain like this love and this openness and this feeling, about like wanting to feel desired and be desired, and this presence that she has about it. And I've layered that and like and drawn these kind of people in. Some of them I met before the pandemic, some I met after the pandemic, but or during even. But these kind of connections and telling these stories and like connecting with these communities, I could not do without the community itself. So,
That's brilliant.
so
So you really appreciate the value of community.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's anything. I don't know life without it, especially growing up in a huge family, tight knit neighborhood, and just like the other spaces that I have had to stay connected to. And even with the arts, like you're the little weird kids. So you kind of need your tribe with you to make sense of life. Like, and so yes, community has been huge to me, and staying connected to it. Like, well, just in general, I don't know how. I mean, I guess I can go get some raw pigments and find some stuff and crush it up and mix my own stuff and find some linseed and crush the oils. But yeah, that's hard. And I don't think I would finish a painting if I had to make it all myself. And I'm definitely not building a whole building and all these kind of things. It's only through community and cooperation that we can execute. I can't make a computer. I need to lean on people around me to do these things, to facilitate conversations like this even. And so I I think I have a sensitive appreciation for community and understand like what it takes to get this stuff done. Maybe that's special, but all of us, if we just take a step back and ask that question, all of us really have to like appreciate community. Even the whole idea of communication and speaking,
Mm.
we train ourselves and learn how to make a whole bunch of weird sounds and jam them together so the people on the other side of it can understand it. Like in certain form. This is all something that we know, whether we know it or not, we know it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, it's we do, but we forget it. It's important to have a constant reminder, I think, don't you?
oh, so I wholeheartedly agree, and that's why I plug in. And a lot of times it's not just about one community. Like there's this whole concept in physics. It talks of, well, not physics, in calculus, called fuzzy groups. Like it talks about how you're grouping different systems and things like that. And I think that's the way I exist in communities, and you grow in that fashion where it's like, oh, I have some similarities with this group here, but some similarities, and there'll be like the occasional overlaps. But in that one thing can like feeds the other, and it blossoms, and it just molds into these different kind of things. And I think that's where the best kind of community actions, and even if you think of ourselves like as the individual, um like not able to be divided, part of it is, but then when you put these things together and you build on that, like the layers of the complexity of the textile and the texture in which community becomes, you know, makes a beautiful thing. Like, and we need that variation, but we need that connection, so we can get like this tapestry.
You have stated that ever so eloquently.
Well, thank you.
Well, as we approach the close of our time, we want to launch into some rapid fire questions.
All right, I got you.
For rapid fire answers.
That's right. And some of these have held up. We kind of came up with these before we actually launched into these. So I'll be interested in knowing how some of the things that we reflected on might influence how you respond. So first question, what role do you think social media plays in fostering a sense of community for artists?
It is a long arm that allows people to reach out and touch people that you would not be in the room with otherwise.
Love that.
So it's a megaphone. I'll call it that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Second question, what advice would you give to someone who is going it alone without the support of a community?
Go find your tribe. Like, you are not in this world alone. Go find your tribe.
All right, final question. How do you define creative community?
That's a hard one. But I think it's a space where people are expressing and bringing their gifts, and intertwining with other people that are expressing and bringing their gifts is a communal exchange that you allow your creative self to be present.
Beautiful, Darin.
It is.
Great answers.
Thank you.
Is there anything that you would like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered in this conversation?
Not a lot. Like, I'll do a little bit of a shameless plug because I always forget that part.
Okay.
Like, I hear people do it and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I'm like, oh, this is smart. You have to do it. So, and I guess with a little bit of it, I can explain it. So Just That Creative is my Instagram handle. Just That Creative is my website. Just That Creative is my nonprofit organization. So, and I do like to, I have in the past like to downplay things. So whenever I've had certain opportunities and things like that, like even right now, I'm going to go ahead and plug a little bit, but then pull back. I'm an architect that actually has work in the Library of Congress that I did when I was in college. And I made it through an hour-long interview without ever mentioning it. And I never think about it. Oh. Like, and so sometimes that downplaying though, and I'm also like a published poet that has stuff with this African literary blog and all this stuff, but I'll go through life and forget to mention that stuff and forget to mention like all these other things I've done, which is unfortunate. So, but now I'm trying to be better about that because I understand people like success stories and people like to see like the process, and as well as the achievement. And I've been also always so just on the achievement in the same way that the heart is kind of overlooked a lot of times, is the most hardworking, constant piece of our body that's just there between the brain and the heart. These are active muscles that are always present, but we forget them and just kind of leave them be. And I don't want to be forgotten like the heart. We're important here. And so, but in that, also like just that creative, like back to what I was saying with that, I have that platform where I post upcoming shows.
Mhm.
So I have an upcoming show at the Golden Black Candle Lounge. But actually, let me start here. I have a first upcoming show coming up is at Jeanette Kennedy Gallery in Southside on Lamar on January 18th. There is advertisement out right now in reference to that. And the opening reception will be on January 18th. That's a Saturday from 6 to 9. Really cool conversations. There'll be some interesting people in the building.
Yeah, you'll have
Also,
the connections and community guys there.
oh yeah, and then brand new works, yes. So Dwight and Maddox will be in the building. It's just a lot of people from around different spaces. So even rubbing elbows with that. Then Golden Black Candle Lounge, I actually have an exhibit on right now, but I have another one coming up in um February. Is going to be some of the more erotic work, so you'll get a chance to take a look at that and what I'm talking about in reference to that connection and different types of life. Because I do go into some alternative lifestyle stuff with that one, some homosexuality and polyamory and things like that also pop up in that work. So, and just like physical connection, but done with a sense of elegance. So, I think that will be an interesting show to check out. I'm going to get the date on that. It will be on the website as well as on Instagram, so you can follow there. um, Otherwise, just stay on the lookout. And as things are coming about, I'm trying to connect with a bunch of different things. One last one, and this is just another community plug. I I'm the outreach chair with NOMA, the National Organization for Minority Architects, and we have a show coming up, Architecture and Poetry, that will be at the Adolphus in August. So that's another thing. See, and that's another thing I forgot to say. And it's only because I need to say it that I sit on the board with the National Organization for Minority Architects, and we're doing like big stuff here in town. I forget to mention stuff. So
So for those that just may not know, everything that he's talking about, all these shows and things are happening in Dallas, Texas.
yes.
So, and you know, you're hearing all he's talking about all this. We will drop links in the show notes, so you'll have access to everything that he's mentioned. So just check the show notes. And I'm glad you mentioned that because we want you to have some exposure from this as much as we can because you've been so gracious to come on and share your story with us and our listeners. So this has been amazing, and Darin, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you too. Thank you too. And we will be in contact soon. I can't wait to, connect and continue.
Absolutely. Dwight, you got anything else?
No, this has been a wonderful session, and we look forward to catching up with you, our brilliant listeners, and the next episode of For the Love of Creatives podcast.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And I will talk to you soon.